there. On the third day, I finished my work. You know where this is going. He knows where this is going. On the third day. What third day are we talking about? He's not talking about going back to Jerusalem on Wednesday. He's not talking about counting those days. He's talking about on the third day. On the third day, he will finish his work. But right now, he's got work to do. It is time to do the work of healing. It's time for Jesus to be in the business of healing. In the back of my mind, I hear when Jesus, we talked about Jesus making wine at the wedding feast. His mama comes to him and says, fix this, Jesus, we're out of wine, fix this. And he says, oh woman, it's not my time. But now it is his time. I think about, too, when Jesus was 12 years old, the only story of his boyhood that we have. They've gone to the temple, they've gone for the great big festival, the big celebration, they traveled all together, they're ready to head home, they're cleaning out, headed back home, and they get a day's journey out, and has anybody seen Jesus? And there are lots of people they're traveling with. He could have been walking with anybody. There are all kinds of cousins and friends and neighbors that he could be walking with. But when it's time for the evening meal and to settle down on the road, they can't find him. And they turn back and they spend 3 days looking for a teenage kid. Almost teenage kid, a 12-year-old kid. When they finally find him, he is in the temple with the Pharisees. And his mama chews him out like any mama would do. And what does he say to her? Where else did you expect me to be but about my Father's business? And right now, Jesus in this place is healing and performing cures. And he is about his Father's business. That's the business at hand. But you know where this is headed. Jesus turns his face to Jerusalem. Now, he knows as long as he doesn't go to Jerusalem, he is safe. He says, I don't have to worry about Herod, because as long as I'm out here in the countryside doing this thing, nobody can bother me, because the only place prophets ever die is in Jerusalem. So he knows. You know where this is going. You know that when he goes to Jerusalem, he knows what the result will be. But at this point, it's nothing to worry about, because he's out in the countryside being about his Father's business. But I believe that on that countryside on that day, he turns his face to Jerusalem. He turns and he longs for the city, the seat of salvation. And he says these wonderful words. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. And in spite of that, how I long, how I desire to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing. Jesus turns longingly to Jerusalem. And Jesus acts like a mother hen. How I long to brush you all up together, to gather you together under the protection of those eternal wings. He calls them together like a mother hen with all those little bitties. In my childhood, my dad taught us a game to play. It's a good Idaho game. It's a game you're supposed to play in the snow. It's a game of chase called Fox and Geese. Amen. You played it. Now, there's a base in the center, and you shuffle through the snow, and you make a great big outer ring, and then you make paths that come into the center. And it's a game of chase. Everybody else are the geese, and there is the fox. And if the fox catches you, then you have to be the fox. And the only place it's safe is right there in the center. So you run like crazy down these pie-shaped pieces, trying to avoid the fox, trying to avoid being it. But the place that's safe is right in the center. Now, you would think, here's Jesus. And Jesus is acting like the mother hen wanting to gather up his children. And Herod is the fox, trying to snatch those children away. Now, wouldn't you think people would want to follow the mother hen that offers protection? But instead, some folks decide to follow the fox. Now, why would you follow a fox? It could be dangerous. For instance, when we would play as children, now, I have to be honest with you, in South Louisiana, my dad couldn't teach us how to play that game in the snow. So we would play it when we go to swim in the river, the Amen River, and we'd shuffle those same paths in the sand. And we would run, and we'd always have a whole crop of cousins playing with us. And we could only play it in the snow. You can play all day because it's cold and you're running and you get warm. But in summer and in the sand, this was a really quick game. But there were always some older, smart-alecky cousins, and they would follow the fox. Now they would do that to torment some younger, slower child, to tease them, and they would follow the fox. Now, out of kindness, sometimes an older brother or sister or cousin would follow a slower, younger child so they could let themselves be caught. But sometimes some smart-alecky kid would try to follow to see how close they could follow the fox before they turned and they ran all the way home to be safe. Sometimes, though, you just run like crazy, trying to stay away from the fox. And you'd run and you'd be so hot and sweaty and sandy, but you'd make it home and you hadn't been touched, you hadn't been tagged, and you would fall safe into the sand, happy with the sand in every corner of your body, happy with the sweat in your eyes, stinging and salty, because you knew you were home safe. Safe. And that's what Jesus is offering the people of Jerusalem, to gather them in and to save them from the fox. But will they listen? Some will follow the fox. So Jesus comes and it's a time for healing. Jesus comes and it's a time for gathering. Jesus comes and it's a time for salvation. Now you know where this is going. You know where Jesus' steps. He's not going to Jerusalem that day, but you know he's going there. And in his sadness and sorrow, he knows not everybody is going to allow themselves to be gathered into his salvation. And he says to them, see, your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. When will he hear that? On the day we call Palm Sunday. When will he hear that? On the day he walks into Jerusalem for the last time, and the people will gather. They'll think they're gathered into his salvation, and they'll wave their palms, and they'll shout, Hosanna, which means save us. But will they be gathered in? Because unfortunately, some of that Hosanna before the end of the week will become crucified. But you realize that Jesus doesn't make this walk to the cross because there's the good people that are just good people and they need saving and they deserve it. You realize that Jesus doesn't make this walk to the cross because there's some disciples. Well, they need to be shown the way that they're not going to follow him. There is no compelling reason for the value of humankind, of their worth or their effort or their own personal self-righteousness that will compel Jesus to do this.